This is the newsroom for Friday, June 11, 2021. We're broadcasting to you on E1, Scar TV, NTN, and Tarzi TV in Bartica. In the headlines, the 26-year-old man who is accused of killing his mother in Linden dies while in police custody. Plans are afoot by the government to go after children who are forced into the streets to beg and work.
We will get them off the streets and we will work with their families to keep them at home.
The World Bank has projected greater economic growth for Guyana this year. A Grenadian doctor and her son are in Guyana for the country's first international kidney transplant. And in sport, Golden Jaguars aiming for improved showing in Gold Cup prelims next month. And Sport Minister Charles Ramson Jr. touts benefits of academies and nurseries for core sports. With the news, I'm Kurt Campbell. We're glad you can join us. First up, Hosea Ajadai, the 26-year-old Linden man suspected of having brutally killed his mother, died suddenly Friday morning, Police Commander Hugh Winter has told the newsroom. Winter said the man, who was thought to have been living with a mental illness, complained of feeling unwell and was taken to the Mackenzie Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at around 8 hours. Ajadai was taken into custody on Tuesday night when the police found him in his home with the battered body of his mother. Winter said Ajadai was never placed in the lockups but was placed on a bench in the inquiries area of the police station. An autopsy is expected to be conducted. Ajadai lived at Karakara Linden with his mother, 56-year-old Wanda Patricia Wilson. On Tuesday night, Wilson was found in her home with a door atop her body. Her body bore marks of violence and her head and face appeared to have been smashed in. We tell you now that plans are afoot by the government and more specifically the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security to go after children who are forced into the streets to beg and work. The announcement was made on Friday by Human Services and Social Security Minister Dr. Vindhya Prasad during her remarks at an event organized by the Ministry of Labour to mark the first ever World Day Against Child Labour, which will be observed tomorrow on June 12, 2021. Here are the details.
So I want that message to ring out there loud and clear. If you can't provide for your child, do not send your child out there to be in the workforce. Do not put your child on the streets. And I want to pause here because we at the Ministry and Child Care Protection Agency, we are going to move on an extensive campaign to target what's happening on the streets where many children can be seen asking for money. You do know it's a crime to give them too. What we want you to do is to report it. We will get them off the streets and we will work with their families to keep them at home. And that work has already started. So sometimes because we are filled with compassion, we want to help that child immediately. You can help that child by reporting and moving that child out of those situations. That's how you help.
That was Human Services and Social Security Minister Dr. Vindhya Prasad during her remarks at an event organized by the Ministry of Labour to mark the first ever World Day Against Child Labour. In a passionate appeal for citizens to help curb this practice, she reminded that it is a crime to facilitate this trend when it involves children. Dr. Prasad said she understands that sometimes because people are filled with compassion, they will want to help a begging child immediately. But she has proposed a different alternative.
It is good to have children involved in chores at home. It is good to give them a sense of discipline and responsibility. But from the time it moves to forcing them, exploiting them, and putting them in the labor force at a tender age, when money is involved and power and intimidation becomes a part of the equation, that is when it becomes wrong.
On the wider issue of child labour, Dr. Prasad said Guyanese have become both dismissive and accepting of something that has become entrenched. She pointed to how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected families economically, allowing for a situation where children are being pushed into the workforce. This level of continued exploitation leads to abuse, she said. On the topic of abuse, Minister Prasad said the number of affected boys is moving perilously close to the number of girls affected by child abuse. More than 600 girls and more than 400 boys are affected.
This is what we know because these cases are reported. And I can say with some level of confidence, if those are the figures, similarly, the reported figures that we are looking at for child labor are probably a lot higher than what is out there for our consumption, simply because it has become accepted.
She believes, however, that ending child labor is not an impossible task. The World Bank has revised its earlier projection of economic growth for Guyana, now projecting that the local economy will grow by 20.9% in 2021, the highest growth rate in the Latin America and the Caribbean region this year. The revision was reported in the World Bank's June 2021 report on global economic prospects released recently. It is, however, unlikely that these local figures include the impact of the ongoing nationwide flooding. In the January 2021 edition, the World Bank had projected that Guyana's real gross domestic product, GDP, would increase by 7.8% in 2021. The new figure in the June report is a 13.1% upward revision of the earlier projection. Generally, the World Bank noted that the global economy is expected to expand by 5.6% this year, which is the fastest post-recession pace in 80 years. Guyana's positive growth is primarily hinged upon developments in its burgeoning oil and gas sector. The economic growth, however, has been constrained by the enduring impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. We tell you now that doctors attached to the Georgetown Public Hospital's Nephrology and Kidney Transplant Department will on Monday, June 14, mark a milestone as the team is set to perform its first operation on a patient from outside of Guyana. Here is Shakima D.
Unable to access the services in her home country of Grenada, the patient, Dr. Jerome Bristol, turned to Guyana for help. Her 19-year-old son, Jerron Bristol, will be donating his kidney. Dr. Bristol explained to the Newsroom on Friday that she first fell ill back in 2012 while attending medical school in the United Kingdom. After her diagnosis, she was put on dialysis and has been on the treatment for over 9 years without hope, since Grenada does not have transplant services.
Well, we don't have transplant services in Grenada. And at present, we only have one privately owned hemodialysis unit. But we are in the process of opening a new dialysis unit at the General Hospital. So by the time I get back home, that should be up and running. But we have no transplant services available. And we have limited specialties. So that again is another issue. Because even things like vascular, we don't have a vascular surgeon in Grenada. So hence we can't really have transplants if we don't have a vascular surgeon.
It was after the team from Guyana visited Grenada on an outreach that Dr. Bristol met Dr. Kishore Prasad, the head surgeon on the team, who quickly got her vetted and approved her and her son for the operation. Asked to share sentiments on her son's sacrifice, Dr. Bristol had this to say.
I am overwhelmed with pride and love and appreciation for what he's doing for me. This is a gift that I never expected that I would receive. And to be here about to get this surgery from him, he's my only son. It's overwhelming. That's the best I can say.
The surgery, according to Dr. Kishore Prasad, is considered a huge milestone for Guyana, as it demonstrates that a third world developing country can offer top medical care like that of a first world country. He added further that after the operation, Dr. Bristol would be able to lead a normal life again. Former Health Minister Dr. Leslie Ramsamy also took to social media to express his pride in the work being done by the department. Reporting for the Newsroom, I am Shakima Day.
Some 41 years after his death, the Irfan Ali-led government has formally announced moves to properly honor prominent Guyanese historian, political activist and academic Dr. Walter Rodney. In a statement to the National Assembly on Thursday, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Anil Nandlal said efforts will be taken to change key details on Rodney's death certificate and make his gravesite a national monument. Nandlal said the actions follow a request by Rodney's family, his wife, children and brother to bring a level of closure. Nandlal said although this son of Guyana was known and respected throughout the world for his academic accomplishments, scholarship, and activism, his death certificate described him as unemployed. The Attorney General said this historical wrong will be corrected and the death certificate will be corrected to read professor instead of unemployed. Additionally, with a 2014 Commission of Inquiry already declaring that Rodney's death was not a misadventure but rather an assassination, The Attorney General said his death certificate will be amended to delete the words misadventure as the cause of death and substitute therefore the word assassination.
This is a momentous occasion for many reasons, and it is also a personal privilege for me, and indeed all of us, to be part of a process to right this tragic wrong and to begin the process of the rectification of the historic record. To say that Dr. Rodney's death and the ensuing events in relation thereto were a horrendous miscarriage of justice would be an appalling understatement. The self-evident truth is that when wrongs of such magnitude occur, they can never really be righted. The least can be done in this instance is to attempt to grant the wishes of the loved ones of Dr. Rodney and to work with them in bringing these wishes to fruition as they attempt to forge their own closure in relation to this horrific tragedy. The Rodney gravesite and memorial are currently being managed collaboratively between the Rodney family and the National Trust. Today, I am proud to announce that they will be declared national monuments and fall under the administration of the National Trust. One of the greatest tragedies flowing from Dr. Rodney's death is the loss of his scholarship to the people of Guyana. His children's books that celebrate the cultural heritage of Guyanese, Coffee Badu out of Africa, and Lakshmi out of India, shall be placed on the national syllabus by the Ministry of Education and in the hands of primary and secondary students across this land. Additionally, his other major works, including a history of the Guyanese working people, Guyanese sugar plantations in the late 19th century, and how Europe underdeveloped Africa, shall be made available to the Library of the University of Guyana. The Walter Rodney Chair at the University of Guyana will be re-established.
Close to $500 million in contracts signed for major rehabilitative works across Guyana and to procure tractors, and 3 government ministers have come together to craft a national plan to address the issue of child labor. Guyana's Civil Defense Commission on Friday received a donation of $5 million from Terminal Paints towards the national flood relief efforts. The simple handing over ceremony was held at the Central Islamic Organization of Guyana, Wolford Avenue, Georgetown. The company's chief operating officer, Fenton Prasad, said that Continental, as a Guyanese company, felt obligated to give back to those families who are currently suffering losses due to the flooding. Meanwhile, CDC's Public Information Officer, Patrice Wishart, stated that the donation will go a far way in supporting the affected families. He said there is need for water purification tablets, items for the shelters across the country, and more important, food items.
At Terminal Paints, we have seen the devastation, we have seen the suffering of our fellow Guyanese. This morning only in the news, we saw that over 29,000 households in over 300 communities have been affected by the flooding. And as a Guyanese company, been around for over 60 years, we feel obligated at this point in time that we should make a contribution. And as such, we have donated $5 million to the relief fund for the CDC. We are hoping that after the recession of the waters and everything else, and at the recovery stage, we may be able to make a further contribution.
First of all, CDC is tremendously grateful to local businesses and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce for the funds donated and supplies towards the flood relief effort. They will go a far way almost immediately. Right behind me, we have food hampers being packed and sent to the National Gymnasium so that they could then be disseminated to various regions across Guyana who are currently affected by the floods.
6 contracts totaling close to $500 million were signed with several contractors on Friday for the supply of tractors for a variety of rehabilitation works to be carried out over the next few months. The contracts were signed in the boardroom of the Ministry of Agriculture in the presence of the subject minister, Zulfikar Mustafa. Among the contracts inked were for the construction of a drainage channel and the reactivation of an existing sluice along the right bank of the Abari Creek in Region 5. It was noted that over 4,000 acres of farmlands used for rice cultivation stand to benefit from the project. The Agriculture Minister, in brief remarks, reminded the contractors that the ministry will not be granting project extensions, urging them to ensure that the works are completed to the best of their ability. He added that the timely completion of the works will aid the ongoing flood relief efforts as the country battles the disaster.
And you all know that we are now experiencing severe flooding across the country because of the excessive rainfall over the last few weeks. And in almost all the regions of our country, we have seen unprecedented high level of water, which is due to the high level of rainfall we have witnessed and also the high tide. And these structures in places like Blackbush Polder, places like in the Abari, are very, very critical and important. I want to urge contractors that they must ensure that they speed up these works, they start these work on time. We will not extend the time of contracts because first of all, as I mentioned at previous contract signing, that we want to ensure that we complete our work program. We want the work to be done to standard. We must observe all the specification, and also we want the work to be done within the time span that is provided within the contract document. As I said, that people are looking forward to us to deliver these services, and government will ensure that we take steps to ensure that contractor deliver and deliver on time.
3 government ministers have come together to craft a national plan to address the issue of child labor, an issue that they say Guyanese have accepted to be the norm. Through a synchronized system, rescued children will benefit from a range of skills training. Underscoring the prevalence of child labor in Guyana's rural and hinterland areas, Minister of Labour Joseph Hamilton on Friday outlined the plan to both remove children found in these situations and then offer them an alternative linked to skills training. Hamilton was delivering the feature address during the launch of Child Labour Month in observance of World Day Against Child Labour on June 12, 2021. He was joined by Minister of Human Services and Social Security Dr. Vindhya Prasad, who along with the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport Charles Ramson Jr. are currently designing a government response to the issue. We must have a national plan, Hamilton asserted. Hamilton said while some persons might want to say that child labour does not exist in Guyana, he personally came into contact with it, staring him in the face on a coconut farm in the Pomeroon River.
This is a national issue that must have a national plan. How we react after. And I came into contact with that staring at me in the Pomeroon River, visiting coconut estates, where you had young men in hazardous conditions working. And at the labor side, there's some things we can do. And we have done. But then it dawned on me, and I mentioned that to the head of UNICEF just 2 days ago. When we remove the 15-year-old from the coconut plantation, what do we do with him? That's a fundamental question we have to answer. Because the 14-year or 15-year-old might be the breadwinner of the family. And therefore, if the other agencies that have responsibility are not there at the same time to hold him, to steer him, to take him or her into some area of learning, some skills training, then it's a wasted exercise.
The Labour Minister said it is against this backdrop that the collaborative approach has become necessary to hold rescued children and to steer them into an area of learning. He said his ministry is willing, able and ready to utilize the Board of Industrial Training to aid the situation. Nonetheless, he says more is needed.
How do we action immediately? This young boy, this young girl that we have taken out of work-related activities, how do we pilot them right away into an area of training and skills development? And that is what we have to fashion. If we don't do that, this exercise is as good as it is. it would have failed in the purposes.
It is for this reason that Hamilton believed government ministries and agencies cannot work in silos. Hamilton said himself, Minister Prasad and Minister Ramson Jr. have already caucused to discuss the matter. Hamilton was joined in his charge by Ministerial Advisor and Chairperson of the Ministry of Labour Child Labour Committee, Gillian Burton Prasad. Burton Prasad said the theme for the observance Act Now End Child Labour was fitting in light of the increase in this social ill due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is for this reason that the resuscitation of the National Child Labour Committee has become necessary. She said the committee cannot work on its own and will require the support from the Trafficking in Persons Task Force and other agencies to ensure that the children of Guyana enjoy their childhood and are not forced to work. A probe by Auditor General Deodat Sharma into the recent fuel scandal at the Guyana oil company Guyoil has concluded with a recommendation to forward the document to the police to determine further course of action to be taken against criminally culpable officials. Finance Minister Dr. Ashney Singh told the newsroom on Thursday, while attending the sitting of the National Assembly, several officials were found to have exercised poor judgment in the matter. Shakima Day reports.
Is, as you already know and as was already in the public domain, there were a number of communications between officials of Guyoil and representatives at various levels of this company, the company in question. And we had already formed a view in government that these communications were inappropriate for a variety of reasons, including the fact that some of these officials who were engaged in these discussions didn't have a mandate to do so. That was not their role or their function. The Auditor General, of course, we also wanted that matter to be looked into, and the Auditor General did ascertain that there was communication between a number of the officials, many of whom have already been identified, and in fact, examining the roles of these officials, the Auditor General found that a number of them, the communications were being engaged with officials who really should not have been engaging in these communications. And
that was Finance Minister Dr. Ashney Singh relaying his comments on the findings of the probe into the fuel scandal allegations at the state-owned Guyana oil company Guyoil. The Finance Minister explained to the newsroom on Thursday that the probe into the fuel scandal outlined several critical findings, confirming what was already suspected by the government. He said that the Auditor General confirmed that there was no contract, verbal or written, with the company involved, Aaron Royalty Inc. And while the recommendation was put forward in the concluded report, Dr. Singh relayed that it is unclear whether the report has been passed to the police. It was already handed over to the chairman of the board of directors at Guyoil, Paul Chung.
I will repeat what I said earlier. We have no room in this government for corrupt behavior, and at a minimum, I would say, even if, and I don't want to engage in speculation or speculative guessing, but at a minimum, the officials concerned exercised extremely poor judgment in this matter. At a minimum, they exercised very poor judgment in this matter. And when you hold important positions in such companies, we expect you to be able to exercise better judgment.
Further, the Finance Minister said that the AG's report contained critical recommendations, chief among which were for the company to strengthen its system. This, he added, was left to the board to implement. The multi-million-dollar fuel scandal allegations surfaced in April. Guyoil later refuted the allegations made by Aaron Royalty Inc. that they were contracted to supply fuel and that there were kickbacks involved. The company had noted that there was no truth to the allegations and clarified that whilst ARI was one of the number of companies which Guyoil had discussions on the possibility of supplying fuel, the oil company did not at any time enter into a contract with them. Reporting for the newsroom, I am Shakima Day.
A motion by APNU-AFC parliamentarian David Patterson, which wants the government to put in place a land use policy for shore bases, has called into question its term in government, one that Finance Minister Dr. Ashley Singh believes was characterized by ineptitude and incompetence. The motion, which was debated and later lost when put to a vote in the National Assembly Thursday night, was described by Dr. Singh as nothing but rank political opposition. Here are the details.
It causes one to wonder if the APNU-AFC believes, as they appear now in their current incarnation, if they believe, as they appear now in their current incarnation, that a land use policy is so important, one has to ask oneself, what were they doing for the last 5 years? What were they doing for the last 5 years?
That was Finance Minister Dr. Ashley Singh. During his presentation on the David Patterson motion, Dr. Singh said the APNU-AFC has already missed its opportunity to put a land use policy in place. In calling for the motion to be rejected, Dr. Singh said the mere formulation of the document has pointed to the ineptitude and incompetence that characterized the coalition's time in government.
Let me go further, sir. If one really were to examine this motion, one would see, first of all, clear evidence that the APNU-AFC is seeking now to advocate actions that they made no effort to take while they were in government. But I will go further, sir, and I will point out that the motion in its very formulation, points to the gross ineptitude and incompetence that characterized the APNU-AFC in government.
This, Dr. Singh said, constitutes a fundamental misunderstanding. He added that in addition to grandstanding, the APNU-AFC was basically pomposetting itself in the House.
And so I submit that in addition to the grandstanding, you know, in the Caribbean there's a word, I believe, I hope I'm using it correctly, there's a word called pomposetting. You sit down in government for 5 years, out of which for 2 years you were squatting illegally. You did nothing except paint fence green, paint building green, print letterhead green. Christmas party, 50 million. That is all you did. That is all you did for 5 years in government, sir. That's all you did for 5 years. And now when the people of Guyana have consigned you to where you belong, you come here and you're pomposetting.
Recalling its history in and out of government, Dr. Singh said the coalition's explicit design has been to frustrate development in Guyana. He said Patterson, the former Minister of Public Infrastructure, cannot demonstrate a single effort during his term in office to put land use policy in place. To make his point on the duplicitous nature of the coalition, the Finance Minister recalled the signing bonus, which he said they lied repeatedly about while being fully aware that the bonus was already received with plans afoot for its use. Dr. Singh went further, telling the House that he spent time searching the APNU-AFC's manifesto of 2015 and 2020 and could not find a single reference on land use policy. Contrast that with the PPPC manifesto in 2020. It clearly speaks to the establishment of a formal interagency mechanism for the purpose of coordination among sectors that will address intersector issues regarding land use policy, one with a regional dimension and which harmonizes residential and commercial interests. Still ahead on the newsroom, we bring you the story of the first Guyanese female to attend the U.S. Air Force Academy. Stay with us. You're watching the newsroom. Emanuela Desir will be the first Guyanese woman to attend the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. During an interview with the newsroom Vishani Raghaber, she spoke about preparing for her new journey and her aim of pursuing her military and science goals while abroad.
Hi, Manuela.
Hi.
To start us off, could you just tell us about this program that you were just accepted into?
Okay, so the Guyana Defense Force posted the applications in the papers. I saw it. A friend basically encouraged me to apply because I always wanted to join the Guyana Defense Force. So I saw it as, even if I didn't get the scholarship, I saw it as an opportunity to get into the Guyana Defense Force because previously they weren't accepting females. So I really thought this was an opportunity to get into the Guyana Defense Force. So you basically get the scholarships through the Guyana Defense Force.
Alright, so can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, perhaps what school you attended and why this drive to get into the GDF?
Honestly, I can't explain it, but I've always loved the way they look in their uniforms. Since I was really young, I wanted to join the Guyana Defense Force. I had no particular reason, but I think it's just one of those things when somebody asks you, oh, what you want to be when you grow up? I always wanted to be in the army. So I grew up on the East Coast with my grandparents and my aunt and my uncle. And I moved to Tongue, I attended President's College and I moved to Tongue and I started Mays High School. I graduated from St. Rose's High School in 2017 after finishing sixth form, and I worked for a year and then I started the University of Guyana, where I just recently finished my associate degree in chemistry. And as I was finishing, I saw the opportunity and I applied. We went through a series of interviews at the Guyana Defense Force, then some at the embassy. It was tough. But because it's not just the interviews and academics, we had to prepare for the CFA, which is the cadet fitness assessment. So this comprised of basically pull-ups, sit-ups, a 1-mile run, shuttle run.
Right. And could you tell us exactly what is the program you're going to be part of in the US?
Okay, so it's a cadet course. So it's basically a military university. So I'll be studying, but you'll have military training. So the first 6 weeks is going to be like full out military training as if I'm in the cadet course. And I think after that, we'll go into like regular school programming. You get up in the morning, you do drills, and then you go to class. And I think it's like you're in the military, but you're studying. So it's going to be hard because you have to manage both.
Mm-hmm. And what will you be studying?
Well, I did chemistry at the University of Guyana, so I'd like to pursue chemical engineering. But I was speaking to some of the students some of the other international students, because we have a group and they have like siblings, cousins and stuff like that are already at the academy or the other academies, because that is in the only academy. So they've been telling me that, you basically pick your major in your second year. So I have like an entire year to decide, but it's definitely something in the science field. So probably chemical engineering or something closely related.
You're the first Guyanese woman to attend this program. How do you feel about that?
Actually, I'm overwhelmed because the messages they're just pouring in, and because while I was going through training, I didn't tell anybody that I was even applying, because I just didn't tell anybody I was applying. And it's like now everybody's like, oh, I didn't know you were joining the army, and I'm just like, well, now. But I'm overwhelmed. I'm excited to represent my country, and I know that I will represent Guyana well. That's really all I can say. I'm very excited, and yeah.
Right. And this is a 4-year program, right?
Yes, because at the end of it, I'll be receiving a bachelor's degree. So I'll be able to major and minor in something, but it's a 4 years program.
Right. And what is the sort of end goal for you right now?
Well, I got into the army, so I really and truly, honestly, I didn't think so far ahead, because I did not expect to reach this far, but definitely looking forward to coming home. And because I trained with people here, so I'm definitely looking forward to coming home and being back with them, serving my country and my family, coming back home to my family. So whatever I learn, I plan to come home and use it.
When the newsroom returns, the financial weather and bridge reports along with sport. Welcome back to the newsroom now for a look at what's happening in sport. We start things off with some football news. After a disappointing run in the first round of the 2022 World Cup qualifiers, the Golden Jaguars, Guyana's senior national men's football team, will now switch focus to the CONCACAF Gold Cup prelims in early July. As we hear in this report, the Jaguars would no doubt hope for an improved showing.
Marcio Maximo has the tedious task of lifting his men for the Gold Cup challenge after a far from perfect run in the just concluded first round of the World Cup qualifiers. Guyana, competing in Group F, finished with just one win from 4 games, ending the 5-team group in the penultimate position. Back in March in the Dominican Republic, the Jaguars started with a 3-0 defeat at the hands of Trinidad and Tobago, but quickly rebounded to stun the Bahamas 4-0. That victory meant they were still in with a chance of topping the group and advancing, had they won the final 2 matches and other results go their way. Those ambitions were quashed earlier this month when host St. Kitts and Nevis emerged with a 3-0 win, effectively ending Guyana's chances of advancing to the next round. In their final game, days later, the Jaguars lost 2-0 to Puerto Rico, with St. Kitts being the only side from the group to advance to the second round. Focus now switches to the CONCACAF Gold Cup prelims, with the Jaguars down to face Guatemala in early July. The draw for the prelims involved the 12 national teams, which earned a place in the Gold Cup qualifiers through their performances in the CONCACAF Nations League group stage, which was played in September, October, and November 2019. This includes the bottom-placed finishes in League A groups, the runners-up in League B groups, and the winners of League C groups. The top 6 teams based on the CONCACAF ranking were preceded into matchups 1 through 6, and the next 6 were drawn from a single pot. The prelim games are Haiti versus St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Guatemala versus Guyana, Trinidad versus Montserrat, Cuba versus French Guyana, Guadeloupe versus the Bahamas, and Bermuda versus Barbados. After direct elimination play over 3 match days between July 2 to July 6, 2021, the 12 teams will be reduced to a final 3 who would qualify for the Gold Cup group stage. Based on the draw, should Guyana beat Guatemala, they would go on to face either Guadeloupe or the Bahamas, and if they win that second contest, they will qualify in Group C. We tell you now that West Indies were in deep trouble by stumps on the second day of the first test against South Africa. Facing a deficit of 225, West Indies closed on a shaky 82 for 4, still trailing by 143 runs. Roston Chase is not out on 21 and Jermaine Blackwood on 10, and they face the uphill task of battling West Indies out of danger on day 3. Craig Braffett 7, Kieran Powell 14, and Shea Hope and Kyle Mears 12 each all fell cheaply as Kagiso Rabada and Enrique Noike took 2 wickets each. Earlier, South Africa extended their overnight 128 for 4 to 322 all out, thanks largely to Quinton de Kock, whose career best unbeaten 141 took the game beyond West Indies, who were dismissed for 97 in their first innings. It was his 6th Test 100 and one that strengthened South Africa's grip on the contest. Bowling for West Indies, Jason Holder took 4 for 75, debutant Jaden Seals 3 for 75, and Kemar Roach 2 for 64. Still in cricket, Guyana and West Indies cricketer Romario Shepard has landed a 6-month deal as brand ambassador of Ginseng Up, distributed by Ansi McAl Trading. The all-rounder inked the agreement this week, stating that he's excited to be the face of the product. Brand manager of Ginseng Up, Gabriel Lopes, said Shepard is a great role model for youths who aspire to excel in sport, as he exemplifies dedication and focus in cricket. Shepard is expected to head out to St. Lucia, where he will be in training for the upcoming tour of Australia to the West Indies before joining the Guyana Amazon Warriors for the CPL campaign. The Barbitian is one of the Guyana Jaguars' top players. He has represented the West Indies in 7 ODIs and 3 T20s. A dropped catch and a questionable umpiring decision proved costly for England on a frustrating second day of the deciding test against New Zealand at Edgbaston. Captain Joe Root put down a chance of Will Young when he had only scored 7, with the New Zealand number 3 eventually falling for 82 to what proved to be the final ball of the day. Devon Conway could have been given out on 22, only for the umpires to adjudge that the ball had not carried to third slip Zach Crawley. Conway went on to make 80. It ultimately meant New Zealand were able to reach 229 for 3, trailing by 74 runs. The hosts moved from their overnight 258 for 7 to 303 all out, thanks mainly to Mark Wood's swashbuckling 41. England's last 3 wickets fell for 15 runs as Dan Lawrence was left stranded on 81 and denied the opportunity of a maiden Test 100. And the Sport Minister Charles Ramson Jr. said the administration is making a concerted effort to develop local sport talents, and one avenue of doing so is the establishment of academies and nurseries for core sports. Delivering remarks at the American Chamber of Commerce's launch of its Young Entrepreneurs Program, the minister touched on plans to foster growth and development of Guyanese sportsmen and women.
So for the first time in the country, we now have a line in our budget for a sports academy. For the first time in our country, the ministry is going to be supporting through our sports academy a nursery for all of the core sports, which means that from the ages of 14 to I think 21 or so, all of the core sports will have their nurseries. And then as we get out of tournaments, you have an elite training academy. The Elite Training Academy is intended that when you have the above average players, they go into the academy where they are paid a stipend for the period of time that they're in there. All these are new initiatives. A lot of these initiatives are new because they're young. A lot of these initiatives are new because they're fresh.
Apart from these initiatives, the ministry has been on several outreaches across the country, with Minister Ramson leading efforts to assess facilities and offer interventions where necessary. Several grounds have already benefited from the Ground Enhancement Initiative, while the ministry has held one-on-one interactions with the associations to have a better understanding of their needs, challenges and plans for their respective discipline. Additionally, works are ongoing on sport facilities in the city, among them the National Gymnasium on Mandela Avenue, the Cliff Anderson Sports Hall on Homestretch Avenue, and the National Racket Centre on Wolford Avenue. In February this year, Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh announced the largest budget ever for sport in Guyana, $1.5 billion to facilitate developmental programs throughout the country. Of the overall amount, $915 million is allocated for the improvement of community grounds countrywide to expand their use as parks and create premium multi-purpose sporting facilities of international standards in regions 2, 6 and 10. Also, improvements include the installation of lights and community grounds, the laying of synthetic materials at the athletics tracks in New Amsterdam and Wismar, and upgrading of other sport facilities. And with that, we've come to the end of the news for this evening. On behalf of the news and technical teams, my name is Avinash Ramzan. Thanks for watching. Have a safe weekend. See you back here on Monday.